I've recently been spending my time like or even this, which isn't productive in any way, shape, or. Get off your phone, please. Thank you. Where were we? Yeah, not productive whatsoever. But why? From what I've observed and how I feel about the world in general, I can tell that we live in a day and age where there are so many ambitions and dreams we have as a society and the next generation. And ambitions and dreams, frankly, we are supposed to have and follow. This might as well just be my point of view, influenced by my upbringing and cultural background. Growing up as a white Asian, which I have seen to have a gradual growth in media, I can only guess due to the Hudson Williams heartthrob storyline currently. But I won't complain, because I love to see Asian representation, and being one helps. Nevertheless, whilst it is a stereotype that Asians strive to be the best, the top of the class or a field, and Asian kids grow up with strict regulations concerning their career and book smarts, it did in fact apply to me. I can't fully hate on it as my ambitions now are quite large, yet I still manage to achieve many of them. But there are many days and moments where it's just simply too much. One could say overwhelming. Probably a cheesy way to get into the topic, but we're gonna roll with it. I am still a student at university, so I am tackling these kind of topics in a very academic way. So we will be analyzing all of this, which we're gonna start with the question, what does that even mean? It can mean many things to all kinds of different people. I've read some papers about the topic, and I've stumbled on a particularly broken down explanation by Ehrlich and Jennifer Ann. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. I'll link the paper down below. In the book, or in the paper, she defines a general structure for the feeling overwhelmed and gives us an insight in how she broke her understanding of her research down into a coherent definition. She begins by explaining how the emotion occurs during periods of intense and psychological and physical stress situations. She elaborates that it's the specific kind of stress that one feels when out of control with one's own life and its possible future and the concern of how others will accept oneself in regards. She separates stress into two distinctive categories, one being psychological and the other being physical. This becomes important when and how one discusses the occurrence of the tackling of this emotion. On the one side, we have the gradual building of stress in the psychological distinction that inevitably causes the feeling of overwhelmed. It's the slow realization of losing control over one's own personal life. Simple, everyday tasks that grow in importance even if there is no such weight on its importance. They take space in that person's life and makes others, maybe more important tasks, less important in the line of finishing them. The supposed need for perfection and speed for the task makes it in turn difficult to build a clever plan of when and how long one task is supposed to take. The then, as a result, neglected tasks become more prevalent in the person's mind, as they are doing one task but still need to do the equally important other task. Their attention, therefore, is always divided. One quote that explains it quite well is, "The future is like the present, inescapably working on the always present, multiple urgent tasks." Another quote that really explained a lot to me was, "The tasks are focal while other considerations such as relaxing, working on hobbies, and spending time recouping are let go. People may still dream of doing other fun activities, but they are usually wistful dreams, holding no substance, no real place other than a dreamed for but unrealizable possibility. On the occasion people pursue other activities, they are experienced not as enjoyable in themselves, but pleasant because they are an escape from the chores they must do." This, I think many, but specifically me and I can relate to quite extensively. Though with me, I have made a hobby and a passion into a version of work, and a series of tasks which is structured and this all correlates to. I have shoved any other creative outlets to the side to make room for more art from this specific category, being illustration, animation, and painting. It became a all-consuming task to create every single day. If you follow my socials, you'll know that I do sketches every day, that I fill a sketchbook spread, not just one page, not just one drawing, but an entire spread. I kind of force myself or try to train myself to actually create that every single day. To draw, sketch, and most importantly illustrate any idea I had, and at a level of perfection that was unfair to expect of myself. I have big dreams and ambitions that I want to reach fast, so I push exactly this kind of stress on myself to get there. Here's where the feeling of overwhelming becomes most apparent to me. After time, I dream of free time and a moment of doing nothing, but don't allow myself to do that or even have that possibility. I start to want to escape from my current life, yet simultaneously wanting it. A paradox that I might never fully grasp or understand. Now, this is one thing, analyzing and realizing this about one's own life and actually doing something about it. It is no secret that I know that this particular habit of mine is in no way beneficial to my overall well-being, make it be mental or physical. It takes immense tolls on my work and its quality. In a way, industrializing my passion and that what was once an escape actually made it something I want to stray away from, I want to escape from, and I want to take rest from. In the past, creating art besides schoolwork was my way of relaxing, getting some free time and actually seeing what's around me and processing everything that I was feeling and thinking. Now, that process has been industrialized and actually been structured in a way where I can make work, where I can do something productive with, which is a pressure in itself. I am not afraid to admit that I have considered several times to disregard art as a hobby in its entirety. It simply became too much of a job. I have slowly worked through that and now can enjoy exactly that part. Knowing that I'm doing something I can enjoy, that I can feel relaxed in. Whilst moments need stress, some moments have deadlines and I need to push myself, but at the end of the day, I'm doing something that I can really filter through my thoughts with and where I can feel relaxed, heard even. Having a hobby and a passion as a job is basically an excuse to do it all the time. That doesn't mean in any way that it has become any easier of straying away from overworking myself. The work still takes me longer than I prefer, and its quality can still suffer from time to time. Take this piece as an example. I started this illustration back in January, and it has now been almost 5 whole months since the origins of this idea, and only now I am able to call this a finished piece. And for example, looking at the background I'll be illustrating in a moment, you can tell the lack of details I decided to disregard in the end. Now, it feels important for me to note that in this particular case, I wasn't necessarily the need for perfection, but more the desire to create. I kept putting deadlines on and pressure on myself to work on this piece, and in turn, I pushed it back further and further. You can imagine, I get back from school or work, and I force myself to do that work first, and then in turn, I want to do something in my free time, which is this illustration, but it feels pressured. It feels like another task, another job I have to do. I simply couldn't forget about my schoolwork or my actual work, which led to me prioritizing other things and making myself feel bad about neglecting this piece that was just to be created for me. Funny enough, I actually had the motivation due to academic pressure. I'm currently working on my portfolio that I'm going to be using to apply to different internships. It's part of my curriculum and I want to be successful in it and actually get a place, as I've been notified that it's quite difficult to get a space in this kind of field. Thus, I want newer works in my portfolio, and this was one that I was putting off and now wanted and had to finish so I could add this new work and this current representation of my skills. I think for many of us, academic pressure is one thing that always pulls through in some way, shape, or form. It's in most cases all we know. Of course, I won't discredit other pressures or even drives and passions, but for me, the academics of it all really keeps me on my toes and keeps me going. Whilst I use the academic pressure for positive use, whilst it can also, in most cases, be a negative force, it still evokes the fear of losing control and structure. It tells my body to feel ashamed to rest. To refer back to being an ambitious person, it doesn't help that I want to achieve a lot in a short amount of time. I want to be that prodigy I can feel proud of. I want to be that person that when you watch a documentary, when you watch a movie about an artist, a musician, or anything that requires a skill-based qualification, I want to be that prodigy that people admire in some way, shape, or form. I simply, at the end of the day, want to feel proud of myself, and that pride can only exist if I achieve something that seems almost impossible to achieve. It is a significant drive for me to continue, but also an obstacle at the same time I must scale to actually feel satisfied with myself. For me, the feeling of overwhelmed correlates strongly with self-worth and how I see myself and my position in society, in friend groups, in work groups. If I'm not doing my best, if that doesn't show, I have that sense of losing control. Whilst I know this about myself, and I know it isn't as serious as I make it out to be, I continue to take on jobs and tasks that pile up rather swiftly. I am always thinking about a task or a job I must complete and in what ways I can go beyond the required frame that was given to me. This forces my mind to be on standby all the time, which can be very taxing and exhausting. It isn't just a possibility, it actually is very taxing and exhausting. I think I need to emphasize that. Your mind wasn't made to be on standby all the time. It's already active 24/7, but it needs time to rest, to do nothing, to just roam free. It can't always be there to be ready to jump into action. It just isn't healthy in any way. And this all lends itself to me feeling overwhelmed more often. Learning to make room for nothing is one thing I must now tackle to better myself. Feeling overwhelmed isn't fun, which I think many of us can relate to. But I think there's also a fundamental fear of doing nothing, especially for ambitious people, but I think in generally for anyone out there that is now starting the job market, for example. Resting feels like a crime. Especially also during school time, it felt like if you weren't studying, if you weren't doing your homework, which reflected in your grades in some way, you felt like you were doing something wrong, like you weren't supposed to be doing it, and that is simply wrong. We should have time to rest. Of course, it's a lot of work, and I think many systems and school systems give us more work than we are able to actually comprehend and do, but making room for nothing, and that excludes TikTok, because I think even watching TikTok, your mind is constantly working, so like even that I would exclude from that. Just simply sitting there is something I think we all need in some way. In addition, I believe many of us, especially those who are now entering the job market and some would call the adult world, we are faced with impossible amounts of pressure we suddenly need to be able to handle and suddenly just know of. An ever increasingly worsening economy doesn't lend any helping hands. Older generations voicing their unsolicited advice that is, in most cases, and in all, telling us that we are lazy, they just push us ever so close to actually being what they are saying. They are manifesting, I don't think I have any better words for it, but they're manifesting us to actually be lazy and not want to work in the economy that doesn't repay us how it used to repay us. Trying to make it in our economy of the modern day can feel so impossible. I can only speak for the field I work in, which is, for one, retail and clothing stores, but also the art world. you only hear, oh, it's difficult, you won't make money, you can't actually get rich from this, which isn't a priority for everyone, but I do think it's a nice little cherry on top to have the possibility and financial freedom that other jobs can also provide. But companies unwilling to hire people with no experience that we have to require in the first place, and older generations in power disregarding our unique and different ways, hindering us from actually having any chance in gaining experience, don't help. Politics actively ruining the state of the earth, economy, and society and letting it get worse for us to fix in the end is just an add-on pressure besides us even trying to get into this adult world. It is in so many ways disheartening and demotivating to actually have dreams and passions when there are so many problems we must stay aware of at all times. It is taxing and takes away from following one's own desires, dreams, and passions. Being able to access most information at all times and being bombarded with problems left and right makes us unable to focus on other things. It also elevates negative emotions and bad mental health. We were not made to know about all problems all the time, especially if we can't do anything about them in the very moment we find out. I think from what I have seen and I have felt myself, there is this pressure that once you find something about a problem, you need to handle immediately. You need to change your lifestyle. You need to change this. You need to change that. It's a lot. And yes, there are so many pressing problems. I can't even count them all. But it also is something we can't single-handedly do. If everyone pitches in, of course, this can work out. Everyone can do their part. Everyone can be part of this and do little things to add on to in the big picture, but in every single problem, not everyone can do everything. They can't be present in everything. That's just impossible and taxing and takes away from living one's own life. And that's where I think in some cases you'd lose my vote. I just don't see the sense of not living your life so others can live theirs. You can do sacrifices, you can help in the ways you can, but I also think you can't forget about yourself. There are a lot of measures to this, and there's a lot I think I need to go in depth on when I'm saying these comments and my opinions, but I think you get the drift, or I certainly hope you do. But to preface, once again, this is just my opinion. If you don't agree, let me know, or you don't have to. It simply is the way I feel about this problem right away. And I also think it's funny that I actually have to excuse this to have this opinion, because that's another pressure I think society and especially the digital world has given a lot of people to always have an explanation and an excuse for the opinions you have is so exhausting. And we live in a world of free speech, as many of us say. And no, and all of us can live and abide by. And having to explain it every single time because one person doesn't understand is just another way to add on stress to your own life. Besides these parts that foster the feeling of being overwhelmed, I believe that keeping up with friends and ones in one's own social circle can be very exhausting and overwhelming at times. I am so glad and thankful for the social circle I have. Like, don't get me wrong, but I am mentally and physically not able to satisfy most of them currently, which not only weighs on my conscience, but it also can feel taxing on the friendship itself. I simply am unable to give them the energy that they deserve, adding another layer of stress on myself to produce more energy, to actually be that present friend that I want to be. I know they understand and that they don't consider me being neglectful in any way, but I can't help but knowing it's not fair towards them. It's not fair for them to put that much energy into me, but I can't reciprocate that. That just doesn't sit right with me. But I also know that I need to take care of myself, that I need to say no to parties sometimes, that I need to say no to hangouts or the occasional McDonald's eat out at night. because I also need to make sure that I am able to provide in the future. I think there's so much that I might want to tackle in another video, but I hope my rambling makes sense to someone that's listening. It also was just important for me to voice all of this because, yeah, I honestly believe there's so much I can add to this topic of discussion, but I will stop here for now. I want to encourage anyone that feels overwhelmed to talk, write, create, do anything to actually get it out of you, get it out of your system, and to materialize it in the world. It helped me feel more comfortable with the feeling and allowed me to actually find ways to deal with it. For me, it was actually admitting through verbal speech and concrete writing that allowed me to understand more. Me writing the script, and yes, I'm using a script. I do go off script that sometimes, but I do use a script. It helped me process all of these feelings. Doing research about the topic helped me understand it more. There's so many brilliant minds out there, and hardworking students and people that can provide you with such big insight that I think it's amiss to neglect that. So for anyone in similar situations, I can only encourage the same. Share and confide in one another, and it does help. You can even use my comment section if you'd like to. But get it out of your system, talk about it, think about it, and actually figure out what is overwhelming you. If you don't know what's overwhelming you, you can't stop it. So with all that said, rest well, do nothing, and rest is just as important to life as any other aspect we might deem influential enough. And I hope we get to see each other in another video. That I hope I won't pressure myself into doing. Bye-bye.